I still remember the day I moved into our small white house on Maple Street, a quiet place that felt like it stood somewhere between Europe and America. The air always felt soft there, and the streets were calm, almost too calm. My husband Daniel had saved for years to buy that house, and when we finally stepped inside, holding our newborn daughter Lily, it felt like everything in my life had finally settled into place. The house had 3 small rooms, wooden floors that creaked a little when you walked, and a kitchen window that let in the warm morning light. It wasn't expensive, but it was ours, and that meant more than anything money could buy. At first, life was simple. Daniel worked long hours, bringing home around $3,000 a month, and I stayed home to take care of Lily. We planned our future in small steps, saving £200 here, $150 there, dreaming about giving Lily a better life than we ever had. But peace doesn't always last, and sometimes trouble enters quietly, without warning. For me, that trouble came in the form of Daniel's father, Edward. Edward started visiting us often, sometimes without even calling first. He would show up at the door with a forced smile and small gifts for Lily. Sometimes he handed me $100 or even £50, saying it was just to help with the baby. At first, I thought he was kind, maybe just a little lonely. But something about him made me uncomfortable, something I couldn't explain. His eyes lingered too long, not just on Lily, but on me as well, as if he was trying to figure something out. Then I began noticing small things going missing. It started with a tiny pink sock. I thought I had misplaced it, so I ignored it. But then a soft baby blanket disappeared, followed by a little sweater I had just washed. I searched everywhere, under the bed, inside drawers, even in the laundry basket, but they were gone. I told myself I was just tired, that being a new mother had made me forgetful. Still, deep inside, a quiet fear started to grow. One evening, as the sun was setting and the house was filled with that golden light, I saw something that made my heart stop. Edward was leaving the hallway near Lily's room, and for a second, I caught a glimpse of something small tucked inside his coat. He walked quickly past me, avoided my eyes, and left without saying much. I stood there in silence, my hands cold, my mind racing. That was the moment I knew something wasn't right. And no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I could feel it. My life was about to change in ways I wasn't ready for. The days after that evening felt heavier, like the air inside the house had changed without anyone saying a word. I tried to act normal for Daniel, for Lily, and even for myself, but my mind kept going back to what I had seen. Edward's hurried steps, the way he avoided my eyes, and that small hidden shape inside his coat. It stayed with me. I told myself there could be an explanation, something simple, something harmless. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I started paying attention to everything. Every time Edward visited, I stayed close. I watched where he walked, what he touched, how long he stayed in each room. I even began counting Lily's clothes. It felt strange, almost wrong, like I was turning into someone suspicious and paranoid, but I couldn't stop myself. The missing items kept adding up. A tiny white mitten disappeared one morning. 2 days later, one of Lily's soft sleep shirts was gone. These weren't things that could just vanish. Edward, on the other hand, acted as if everything was perfectly normal. He would sit in the living room, ask polite questions, and sometimes hand me money, $50, $100, once even £200, like he was trying to prove he was helpful, generous. But now, instead of feeling grateful, I felt uneasy. It was as if every kind gesture came with something hidden behind it. One afternoon, I decided to test something. Before Edward arrived, I placed a small blue baby sock on Lily's crib, making sure it was clearly visible. I didn't touch it again. When he came in, I stayed in the kitchen but kept watching through the slight reflection on the glass cabinet. I saw him walk into Lily's room slowly, looking around as if he didn't want to be noticed. My heart started beating faster. I held my breath. A few minutes later, he came out, and the sock was gone. That was the moment my doubt turned into certainty. I wasn't imagining things. Edward was taking Lily's clothes, and he was doing it on purpose. But the question that terrified me the most was, why? I didn't confront him right away. I needed to understand more. I needed proof, something I could show Daniel, something that couldn't be explained away. So I stayed quiet, even though it felt like my chest was tightening with every passing day. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Edward had stopped by unexpectedly, as usual. He stayed for less than an hour, which was strange for him. He seemed distracted, checking his phone again and again. Then suddenly, he stood up and said he had to leave.
He didn't even wait for his usual tea.
He walked out quickly, almost in a rush. It wasn't until a few minutes later that I noticed his leather bag still sitting on the kitchen chair.
I stared at it for a long time.
My hands felt cold, and my heart wouldn't slow down.
I knew I shouldn't open it. It wasn't mine.
But then I thought about Lily, about the missing clothes, about the way he had been watching me. And before I could stop myself, I reached for it. The zipper made a soft sound as I opened it, and for a moment, I almost closed it again.
But I didn't.
Inside, there were small plastic bags, neatly arranged.
My breath caught as I pulled one out.
Inside it was a tiny piece of fabric, a part of Lily's blanket.
Another bag had a baby sock. Another had a mitten. My hands started shaking.
This wasn't just stealing.
This was something else. Something planned. Something deliberate. Then I saw the papers.
They were folded carefully, placed at the bottom of the bag. I took them out slowly, my fingers trembling as I opened the first page.
At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at.
There were numbers, charts, and long words I couldn't fully process.
But then I saw it.
DNA test report.
I felt like the ground beneath me disappeared. I flipped through the pages quickly.
There wasn't just one report. There were several. All of them comparing Lily's DNA with Daniel's. My eyes moved across the words again and again until they landed on the same line in each report. Paternity, 99.99% confirmed.
I couldn't breathe properly.
If the results were clear, if they already proved Lily was Daniel's child, then why keep testing?
Why take her clothes again and again?
Why follow me? Because in that moment, everything started to make sense in the worst way possible. The times I thought I saw Edward near the grocery store. The moment I noticed someone watching from across the park. The feeling that I wasn't alone, even when I was.
It wasn't my imagination. It was him. He had been watching me.
My knees felt weak, and I had to sit down. I looked around the quiet kitchen, at the same walls that once made me feel safe, and suddenly they didn't feel safe anymore.
They felt watched. They felt exposed.
I gathered the papers slowly, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers to. My first instinct was to call Daniel, but I stopped myself.
How could I explain this? How could I tell him his own father had been secretly testing our child?
I needed to think.
I needed to understand.
But more than anything, I needed the truth. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just strange.
It was something much deeper.
And I had a feeling that what I had just found was only the beginning.
That night felt longer than any night I had ever lived through.
I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those papers again, the DNA reports, the numbers, the cold confirmation that should have ended any doubt. But instead of ending anything, they had only opened a door to something darker. Daniel came home late, tired as usual, his coat still smelling like the outside air. He smiled when he saw Lily sleeping peacefully, but the moment he looked at me, his expression changed.
He knew something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked quietly. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, and my hands were still shaking slightly. But then I handed him the papers.
He looked confused at first, flipping through them slowly. Then his face turned pale. "What is this?" he whispered. "It's from your father," I said, my voice barely steady.
"He's been taking Lily's clothes.
He's been testing her DNA, over and over again." Daniel stared at me, then back at the papers, as if hoping they would somehow change. "That doesn't make any sense," he said.
"Why would he do that? I never asked him to."
"I know you didn't," I interrupted, more sharply than I meant to.
"But he's been doing it anyway.
And Daniel has been following me too."
The room fell silent.
I watched as confusion turned into something else in his eyes, something heavier, something closer to fear.
For a moment, neither of us spoke.
The only sound was Lily's soft breathing from the other room. "We need to talk to him," Daniel finally said.
I nodded. "Tomorrow."
But when tomorrow came, it didn't bring answers easily. Edward arrived just after noon, like nothing had happened. He even smiled when he walked in, asking about Lily in that same calm voice.
But the moment he saw both of us standing there, waiting, his smile faded.
"We need to talk," Daniel said. Edward looked between us, then slowly stepped inside.
"What is it?" I didn't wait.
I placed the leather bag on the table, along with the papers. For a second, something changed in his face, just for a moment, but then it disappeared. "I don't know what you think you found," he said calmly. "But—"
"Stop," I said firmly.
"Please don't lie."
My voice surprised even me. It was steady, stronger than I felt inside.
You've been taking Lily's clothes, I continued. You've been running DNA tests.
And you've been following me. I want to know why. Edward's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Daniel stepped forward.
Dad, just tell us the truth. I already told you, Edward said, his tone colder now. You're overthinking this.
No, I said quietly.
You're hiding something. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. If you don't tell us the truth, I said, looking directly at him, I will leave. I will take Lily, and you will never see her again. Not here, not in any city across America, nowhere.
The words hung in the air.
For the first time, Edward looked shaken. He stared at me, then at Daniel, and something in him finally broke. His shoulders dropped slightly, and he slowly pulled out a chair and sat down. He covered his face with his hands for a moment, as if trying to hold something inside. I had to be sure, he said quietly. The words were soft, but they carried something heavy. This time, I had to be sure.
Daniel frowned.
What do you mean, this time? Edward lowered his hands slowly, and when he looked up, his eyes were no longer cold. They looked tired, and full of something I hadn't expected.
Pain.
You think this is about you, he said, looking at me. But it's not. Not really. Then what is it about?
I asked.
He took a deep breath, as if preparing himself to say something he had kept buried for years. 27 years ago, he began, my life was very different. I was living in a small town, working hard, saving money, pound 5000 here, $10,000 there, trying to build a future. I had a wife, and I trusted her completely. He paused, his gaze drifting somewhere far away. But then things changed.
Small things at first. Late nights.
Strange behavior. Moments that didn't feel right.
I told myself I was imagining it.
That I was being unfair.
Daniel stood completely still, listening.
And then, Edward continued, you were born.
The room felt colder somehow.
I should have been the happiest man alive, he said. And I was, at least on the outside.
But inside, something was wrong. The doubts didn't stop.
They grew stronger.
Daniel's voice was barely audible.
What are you saying? Edward looked at him, and for a moment, I saw something fragile in his expression. I'm saying, I never knew if you were truly my son. The words hit like a shock.
Daniel stepped back slightly, as if he had been physically pushed.
You never told me this, he said. How could I? Edward replied, his voice breaking slightly. I had no proof. Back then, I didn't have money for tests, not at first. And by the time I could afford it, it felt too late. I was afraid of what I might find.
He looked down at his hands.
So I lived with it.
4 years.
I raised you. I loved you. I gave you everything, but that doubt never left me. It stayed here, he said, touching his chest, every single day. Silence filled the room again, heavier than before. And when she came into your life, he said, glancing at me, and then the baby was born, it all came back.
I felt my breath catch.
I told myself I wouldn't let it happen again, he continued. I wouldn't live with doubt for another 20 or 30 years. I needed certainty. I needed the truth. So you followed me,
I said, my voice trembling slightly.
You stole from my baby. I didn't know any other way, he said, almost defensively. I thought, if I could just confirm it once, I would stop.
But you didn't stop, I said.
There were multiple tests.
He closed his eyes briefly.
Because one wasn't enough. I didn't trust it. I didn't trust anything anymore. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly overwhelmed. All this time, this wasn't about her, he said, nodding toward me. It was about you. Edward didn't deny it. I was trying to protect you, he said quietly. No, Daniel replied, his voice stronger now. You were trying to protect yourself.
Those words seemed to land deeply.
And in that moment, I finally understood something important.
This wasn't just about suspicion.
It was about a man who had been carrying a wound for 27 years and never found a way to heal it.
But understanding it didn't make it right. Not even close. The truth didn't bring peace the way I thought it might.
Instead, it left behind a quiet heaviness that settled into every corner of the house. After Edward confessed, no one knew what to say next. Daniel stood near the window for a long time, staring outside as if he was trying to see his entire life from a different angle. I stayed close to Lily, holding her a little tighter than usual, as if she could somehow protect me from everything that had just been said. Edward didn't argue anymore. He didn't defend himself either. He just sat there, silent, like a man who had finally run out of reasons. For the first time since I had known him, he didn't feel intimidating or controlling. He just looked tired. But tired or not, what he had done couldn't be ignored. "I need space," I said finally, breaking the silence. Daniel turned toward me immediately. "Of course," he said. "Whatever you need." Edward looked up, but I didn't meet his eyes. "You're not coming here for a while," I continued, my voice steady but firm. "Not until I feel safe again. Not until I can trust that nothing like this will ever happen again." He nodded slowly. "I understand. And if you ever follow me again," I added, looking directly at him now, "or take anything from my child again, I won't just leave. I will make sure you never come near us." There was no anger in my voice this time, just certainty. Edward didn't argue. He simply stood up, picked up his empty leather bag, and walked out of the house without another word. The door closed softly behind him, but the silence he left behind felt loud. That night, Daniel and I talked for hours. Not just about what had happened, but about everything, his childhood, his memories, the small things he had never questioned before. He told me how Edward had always been strict, always a little distant, but never cruel. Now, everything seemed to make more sense, even if it didn't make it easier. "I don't even know who I am to him anymore," Daniel said quietly at one point. "Or who he is to me." I didn't have an answer for that. But I did know one thing. I needed to get away for a while. A few days later, Daniel gave me $2,000 and told me to take a break. "Go somewhere peaceful," he said. "Take Lily. Clear your mind." So I did. I rented a small house near the coast, far from the town, far from everything that reminded me of what had happened. The house was simple, with light blue walls and a wide window that faced the sea. Every morning, I would sit there holding Lily, watching the waves move slowly, listening to a world that felt calm again. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. Those days gave me space to think, not just about Edward, but about myself, about what kind of life I wanted moving forward. I thought about anger, about fear, about trust. I realized that if I held on to all the anger, it would only grow inside me the same way it had grown inside Edward for 27 years. And I didn't want that. But forgiveness wasn't simple either. When I returned home after 2 weeks, things felt different. The house was the same, but I wasn't. I felt stronger, clearer. Daniel noticed it too. "I missed you," he said, holding Lily gently. "I needed that time," I replied. We slowly returned to our routine, but there was still one question left unanswered: what to do about Edward. Months passed before I made that decision. One afternoon, I told Daniel that I was ready for Edward to visit again, but only under certain conditions. He agreed immediately. He understood that trust wasn't something that could just come back overnight. The first time Edward came back, everything felt tense. He stood at the door like a guest who wasn't sure if he was welcome. He didn't bring any gifts this time. No money. No bag filled with secrets. Just himself. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. I nodded. That visit was short. He didn't move around the house much. He stayed in the living room, spoke softly, and kept a respectful distance from Lily until I allowed him closer. Every movement felt careful, like he was afraid of making even the smallest mistake. And maybe that was a good thing. Over time, the visits became a little easier. Not normal, not the way things used to be, but calmer. He never went into Lily's room alone again. He never stayed too long. And slowly, very slowly, I began to feel less tense when he was around. But I never forgot. And I never fully let my guard down. One evening, as I watched Edward sitting quietly across the room while Lily played on the floor, I realized something important. Some people carry pain for so long that it becomes a part of who they are. It shapes their actions, their fears, and the way they see the world. Edward had lived with doubt for 27 years, and in the end, that doubt had controlled him. But I had a choice. I could let his past become my burden. Or I could stop it right here. So I chose something in between. I didn't erase what he did. I didn't pretend everything was okay. But I allowed a new kind of relationship to exist, one built on clear boundaries, honesty, and careful trust. As I picked Lily up and held her close, I knew one thing for certain. Her life would not be shaped by fear. And neither would mine. Because some stories don't end with perfect forgiveness or complete healing.
Some stories end with strength. And that was enough for me.